Good afternoon, my friends. Time to make a quick video about the card Village Rites, Will It Rock? So, some people have been asking me about this. I thought it pertinent to address it, partially because I've been, as mentioned, asked about it, but partially because it's actually, kind of a nutty common. It's a 1 mana draw 2. And as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature. But, number 1, that's actually a really good rate already, if you have the right creatures to sacrifice. And number 2, crucially, it is an instant speed card and therefore can be done, after assigning a chump block in response to removal, so on and so forth. So it's kind of a crazily pushed common in my view. It's also a suitably cool and creepy card if you look at the name and the art and the flavor text and all that. So there's a lot to take in here and there's a lot to think about. But I also have to come down pretty firmly on the side of no, it will not rock. It will not see play in modern BGX. You should not put this card in your BGX deck. But that might only be true for BGX. In other words, there might be other modern shells that want this, and I think I might know one of them. I'll give you a hint. It's basically red rock. We'll talk about that in the second half of the video. And of course, other formats, maybe like a Pioneer Aristocrats deck or any number of Pauper decks, of course. Again, it's a common. So we'll leave that, that's kind of beyond the purview of this channel. But let's talk about the card. Let's talk about why it will not rock in BGX. And then let's talk about what might be kind of a cool home for it. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to the patrons, and let's get into it. Alright guys, so Village Rites, I've kind of already covered what needs to be covered just in the opening minute. Instant speed, 1 mana, additional cost to cast it, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. So the thing that people have been telling me is that it's a 1 mana draw 2, so it's good in our deck. It's good advantage, especially if you can do it in the face of removal, and specifically people are like, well, when Dark Confidant gets out of control, you can cash him in. Now, this is a classic logic trap, basically, like the notion of Vraska Golgari Queen being especially good because she can cash in your Dark Confidants, for example, or other sacrifice this permanent for X benefit. These things are all potential synergies with Dark Confidant, but you should not be including them in your deck with the expectation that you will get all kinds of value out of an uncontested Bob and then be able to cash him in at the exact right time for even more value. That is what we colloquially call Magic Christmas Land. In Magic the Gathering, it's just not going to happen all that often. On top of that, compounding that issue is the fact that the creatures in BGX, besides a kind of past his sell-by date Dark Confidant, are distinctly not expendable. Think about Tarmogoyf. Think about Tireless Tracker. Think about Questing Beast. Think about Hex Drinker. Think about Scavenging Ooze, and this is just in the BG Rock family. We're not even going to talk about the red creatures of Jund, the blue creatures of Sultai. Admittedly, the white creatures of Abzan, thinking of Lingering Souls especially, you might have some more joy there. Admittedly, you might have some more joy. There might be something there, but I still don't think it's that great of a fit unless you're building very highly around it. And we cannot afford these types of build-arounds for a cute little synergy that ultimately only amounts to a 1 mana draw 2. While the 1 mana draw 2 is absolutely incredible, the format is now rife with all kinds of extremely proactive, extremely non-conditional 2-for-1s. And we cannot afford to play reactively, to play with a card that is very conditional, and we will often have a tension between holding on to it or pitching it to our own Liliana of the Veil +1, for example, in the face of other decks that are just like, okay, I'll cast my Astrolabe and draw a card and then fix my mana. I'll cast my Quattle and get a really nice 2-for-1. I'll cast my Uro and get a really nice 2, 3, 4, 5-for-1. The longer it goes uncontested and the more times you can bring it back. Village Rites, again, a very, very strong card, an extremely pushed common, but one that is nevertheless not a good enough fit for a traditional BGX deck. But again, I do think there might be a home for it. Let's talk a little bit about that next. Okay, guys, so here is the Red Rock list I kind of mentioned earlier. It is a Rakdos Skelemental deck, a Rakdos Unearth deck, and I was actually tinkering with this and getting some practice lobby games in with this before Ikoria came out, and then Companion turned the meta on its head, and I kind of put it on the shelf, and right now my interest in, like, really diving headlong into Modern is kind of low. So this is very much on the back burner, but it did immediately occur to me when I saw Village Rites that this would actually be a really interesting home for it. And this is actually very instructive to my earlier point of why it's not a good fit in BG The Rock or in other BGX decks, even though this is a very strong parallel. It's, it's a 2-color, it's black-based mid-range, why does it fit so well in one and so not well in the other? Well, it really has to do with the nature of the threat. So let's break down the threats in a Rakdos Skelemental deck. First of all, you have the namesake card Lightning Skelemental. Skelemental has got a really strong on-hit proc. The opposing player discards 2 cards. It's a 6/1 with trample and haste. This is a very aggressive resource denial card, but at the beginning of the end step, you have to sacrifice Lightning Skelemental. Well, guess what? Before that end step comes around, that's right, it's Village Rites time. You cash it in, draw 2. That's actually kind of an incredible synergy. But again, as with Dark Confidant and Green-Black, you don't want to have only one card to build around with, and then you're kind of having it sit in hand the rest of the time waiting for the opponent to cast a removal spell. So what else do we have? Well, Seasoned Pyromancer. Now this is just as good, in fact sometimes a better target, because Skelemental, you'll often cast it on curve and maybe you won't have the free mana hanging around. Spyro, that's quite a different story. Spyro is a card that you stick when you want to extend the game and when you want to dig for fresh cards, and Village Rites cashing in a token is insane value because Spyro is already an X for 1 in his own right, and then when you turn a token into draw 2 on top of that, that's crazy. And even cashing in Spyro himself is very reasonable, again, because he was already an X for 1 in your favor, and you can get value out of the back half, out of the graveyard, flashing back to create 2 more elemental tokens, maybe finding more Village Rites. Do you see where this is going? Do you see the insane amount of card advantage potential in a deck that is otherwise almost solely dedicated to resource denial? This is the type of synergy and the type of expansion of kind of purview of the deck that we need to be looking at if we want to include a card like Village Rites, find a good home for it. Croxa is another great fit. Croxa is another great fit. With the Croxa sacrifice trigger on the stack, Village Rites can be played, even if, so the game gets really weird and you've escaped it, and for some reason you want to cash it in for draw 2, well, at least it's recursive and it can come back. That might honestly be your best play in a lot of situations, especially if you can get an attack in first. I mean, you've got real potential synergy there with Croxa. And finally, Dark Confidant. As mentioned in BGX, you can maybe cash in a Bob who is past his sell-by date, but unlike in BGX, where Bob is the best and most realistic target, outside of maybe a White Splash for Lingering Souls and Abzan for Village Rites, Bob is actually the least appealing, on average, target for your Village Rites here in this deck. Therefore, that just goes to show you how much better of a fit Village Rites would be in a shell like this. And, again, this is not an up-to-date list. I haven't really looked at it, frankly, since before Companion came out, and I haven't tinkered with it since Village Rites came out, so this is just how the deck is. I have not even made a single change to consider the potential inclusion of Village Rites. This is just how the deck was before, just kind of a really good fit for the card. Now, granted, what to cut would be a very interesting discussion. That's not what we're here to do, but it's just kind of an idea I wanted to plant in your head. Number one, to really drive home the point that, this is what a promising shell for Village Rites looks like, not BGX. And number two, if any enterprising brewers out there want to take a stab at Rakdos Skelemental, maybe including Village Rites, I think this is a great place to start. So there you go, guys. One of the more pushed commons I've ever seen, not ever, but recently seen, and a super cool card. Despite that, I cannot in good conscience advocate that you play it in BGX. Again, a lot of people have been asking me about it. I've got to say no. But I will say that, again, the red rock shell is kind of cool. Other shells definitely could be promising, and unfortunately, this is one of those things that might punish our removal. So when we are casting our fatal pushes and so forth, watch out for opposing Village Rites. It could happen to you. It could happen to you. But overall, I do have to say, so far so good with M21. I think it's a really cool set. Lots of needed reprints, which I like. Lots of cool designs, some cool stuff like Grim Tutor entering the format. So far so good. I'm recording this on Tuesday afternoon, and a lot of things that I've seen are to my liking so far. Definitely a breath of fresh air in comparison with some other recent sets, let's just put it that way. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think below about the card Village Rites. It's a cool one. I thought it was worth covering, and I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. I will talk to you soon. I will hope to see you for the next video, and I also hope that everybody out there has a wonderful day.